Hey everyone, it's Eric with FirearmTutorials.com, and today we're going to look at the RCBS Case Prep Center. You can see I'm using it to process some 223 brass here. I'll give you guys a look at this machine, kind of tell you a little bit about the different stations in it, how I use it, and you'll get to see the results so you can decide for yourself if this is something worth purchasing or you just want to know a little bit more about it and how it works. So you'll see here I'm using it on some 223 brass, and what we're doing is removing the military crimp so that we can seat a new primer in it, and we're also using the chamfering and deburring tools. So if we look at all the 5 stations, in the top here we've got just a brush that cleans the primer pocket area. Depending on how you're cleaning your brass, this may or may not be useful to you. That's a small size primer pocket. It also comes with a large, in case you're doing 308 or something that uses large brass. You can see up at the top it's got these brushes which you can take out and substitute in any of these stations. All of these just unscrew so you can mix and match the components in here or the order of them to suit your needs. As well as the brushes, we've also got the Crimp Remover. This is the official military Crimp Remover. Over here is a primer pocket uniformer. We've got a chamfer and deburring tool. With the specific brass that I'm working with here, this is the newer Lake City stuff, but you see it's got that 4-corner stake-typed military crimp in it. If we use a swage gauge here to check, you'll see that no go. So we're going to need to swage this to remove that crimp and be able to seat another primer. So if we run it on the military Crimp Remover, see, just kind of put it on there and wobble it around. With this specific stake type crimp, it doesn't always work. So you see that's really not going to go. So we'll go ahead and use the primer pocket uniformer here. Now the thing with this is you got to hold on pretty hard. You'll get the technique going as far as how to kind of get this on here, but you want to go kind of at an angle and kind of slowly, because this tool will catch this case and then it'll start spinning like that. So once we've run it through there, you can see that our gauge is now working. We've got a good crimp removal, so a primer will be able to seat in there. It's not over swaged. Now this chamfering tool is basically meant to put a slight taper on the inside of the case mouth that is to aid in seating the bullet. If you're using boat tail bullets, it's really not necessary, but if you're using a flat base bullet, it kind of guides the bullet down in there as it's seated, because if you don't do this and you're using a flat base bullet, what can happen is as the bullet is seated, the neck of this case will shave some of the copper jacketing off as it's seated, and then you'll end up with some copper around the edge, which you don't want. So in addition, what I use this for is just to set it down very lightly like such. You don't want to push too hard because you don't want this to go deep into the top of the primer pocket. But what I'm doing here is just adding a slight little bevel on the back of the case here, so that when you go to seat a primer in, especially on a progressive press, if you're using some of those harder primers, the CCI or military primers, that it makes it a little bit easier to seat, because a lot of times those are so tough. If it's not lined up exactly, you get a little bit of resistance on there and it's harder to seat that primer. So that's what I use that for. The deburring tool here, if you are trimming the cases, a lot of times it'll cut it straight across and you'll end up with some burrs around the case, around the neck of the case here. So basically you just put it down like such and it'll grind down any of those burrs and make the case nice and smooth. So if we look at one that hasn't been deburred and chamfered, not that this is a good example because it doesn't actually have any burrs on it, but you can see how there's that slight bevel or that slight little taper on the inside and outside of the case mouth. So that's what that tool is doing. Now, some of these tools are specific to the size primer pocket that you're using. This brush, like I said, is for a small primer. They have the large one, so if you're doing 308 or anything that uses a large primer pocket, you have that as well. It also comes with these deburring and chamfering tools. These are pretty much universal I've used these with 300 blackout and 223. So like I said, you just put the case over it and it'll just take off whatever excess is on there. Now these tools here, the Crimp Remover and the Primer Pocket Uniformer, are sold separately. These are about $25 each. So you figure you're adding about another $50 to the cost of the unit, which is anywhere between $120 to $130 depending on where you buy it. So now something to remember with these is they are specific to the size of primer pocket. So if you're using small brass or small primed brass, like I said, these are going to work for you. But if you're using 308 or anything like that, you're going to also have to buy the larger primer pocket Crimp Remover and Uniformer, so that's going to run you another $50. Something to consider. So you saw when I use this military crimp is not bad, at least with the staked type brass. Now when you run it through here, like I said, you got to be careful because it'll grab a hold of it and that case will start spinning. So you have to have a tight grip on it. If I was doing, thousands upon thousands of rounds like this, my hands would start to hurt pretty quickly, so it's not something that I would necessarily recommend for doing bulk processing of brass. You're probably better off doing that inside the press, whether you have a 1050, a 650 with some type of tool, a super swage. Pretty much anything that's going to be a lot easier on your hands is going to be better to use for this in quantity. So what I use this for most of the time, I'm doing a little extra work here because I'm going to load these specifically with a different kind of powder. But if I'm running them through the progressive press and they've been swaged with some other method than this, you'll run into one inevitably that either hasn't been swaged or hasn't been swaged enough. You can take it out of the progressive press, put it on here real quick, in a couple seconds, you've removed that crimp, you put it back in the machine and you're back in business. It doesn't slow you down too much. So that's pretty much the two ways that I use it. It's a good machine. I would say the only thing that I don't like about it is, like I said, it's hard to get the primer pocket uniformer, going there. But like I said, after you use it for a little while, you'll get used to how it feels and how it runs, and you won't have to check it with the gauge every time. And like I said, I keep it off to the side. It works great as something when you're in a pinch. Eventually, these tools will get dull, right? Because you're metal against metal. Even though brass is a lot softer over time, these tools are going to eventually start to get dull and they're not going to work as well. I will say I would estimate that would take tens upon thousands of rounds to get to that point. The machine itself I think is well made. I think it's well worth it if you're going to reload military brass. Overall, that's it, guys. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.